Hello, and welcome to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. This is our Zettelkasten week, and boy, do we have a fantastic program ready for you today. I'm not going to spoil it, though. I'm going to send it right over to Victoria to get us started. Victoria?
Hello, Lilligans, anti-novelists, onlookers and friends, and everyone else who's been showing up. This has been so much fun to watch everyone pop in and ask questions. So on the topic of questions, I'm going to continue down the road of the zero draft, which is where I've covered in the week before this one and the week before that one, so the last 2 weeks, what is the zero draft and how do you use it? How do you build it? What does that look like? So my key questions were, can you show us an example? Because it's still a little ethereal, like it's too slippery to grasp onto for some of our newer writers. Well, lucky for you, I happen to have on my desk my zero draft for the book that I'm writing, Zettelkasten for fiction writers. So let's take a look at this. And then Kathleen has a major treat for you, because when I throw her the ball, she's going to pick up where the chaos leaves off and walk you through what the actual Zettelkastening of the information looks like. So this is going to be so awesome. This will be an episode that you will want to watch at least twice, because it's going to be packed full of details and information. Some of it is in the numbering weeds, just a tad. So you may want to watch it a couple of times and really get a sense of how this information makes sense to you, because that's the most important thing. We're not doing this to tell you how you should do it. We're doing it to show you how we do it and then give you options for how you could. So it's very important as you follow this process to look at it in terms of what makes sense to me. How am I going to think about this information, and what am I going to think of when I want to go back and find it again? And that's going to help build your box. So let's get into it. When I set about writing the chapters in my book on theme and symbolism, those are the chapters I'm working on now, I thought, well, I want to pull out everything that could inform those chapters. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Your zero draft may not only be comprised of note cards. For example, I have a slip of paper here that is actually a piece of type paper that is literally torn off, folded up, and numbered in the corner. So that's a component of my zero draft. It's literally something that I thought of more than a year ago, didn't know what I was going to do with it. So what did I do? I put it in my index under theme. I gave it a number and I filed it in my box until the day at which I thought I would need it, which has been this week. So, scrap of paper. Then, some of you know that I often carry with me, I like to call these my mobile decks or my flash bunnies. They're just note cards cut in half and bound in the corner on a book ring. And I can throw one of these into my bag and take it with me. Then when I have ideas, I jot them down. At some point, at the end of each week, I take all of those, I take them off of the book ring, and I process them into my note box. So that's what these are. These are 3 cards that were on my book ring in my bag. They spent actually quite a bit of time in the bottom of my bag, but I knew where they were, not a big deal. And this is 3 ideas on how you can develop theme. I had a writing teacher, oh gosh, way back in the early 90s, that gave me a great way to think about and break out theme and how to identify it in literature. So something reminded me of that. I jotted it down on my cards, and those got stuck in to the zero draft material because it's great exercise. I also have this little card that's actually a note card of 4x6 folded in half. And what's on the inside, it's pretty faintly written, but it's a drawing of a workflow for what I think a research capture might look like in regards to theme. No, this one is in regards to symbolism, but I just drew it out literally with little pictures of books and little pictures of manuscripts. So that is another example of things that could go in your zero draft. Maybe you draw out the block on which your main character lives. Maybe you draw out the inside of your side character's office because you need to remember where things are situated in the office so that later on when you make reference to it, you remember that that person has a mahogany desk with a big overstuffed couch and not 2 chairs, right? So it can serve continuity. But anything can be part of your zero draft. So then I have some character cards. This one is swiped across the top with a pink line. So I know at a glance, this card refers to something about my main female character because her color is pink when I'm drafting. So this is something about theme that I wanted to make a reference to this character for. So it goes, like everything else, in the zero draft pile. Now you should notice, these are just collections of ideas at this point. They haven't been properly numbered in the plot box. They haven't been properly installed necessarily into my Zettelkasten at all. They're just ideas in kind of a loose order that I think I might use. That's zero drafting. Finally, I have the actual cards on which I've done research. Now these are numbered with 1150, which is the number of the book that I'm writing for fiction writers. So these have been properly numbered and installed, in my mind, in the chapter where they live. So that's an example of what I consider location-based numbering. I will always think about these things as a section of the book that I'm writing. So in my mind, they don't need to be filed anyplace else. They will be filed within the chapter structure of the Zettelkasten for fiction writers. So that's those cards. And then finally, I have a couple of cards that refer to videos that I want to make sure that I reference as some of my works cited. And then I have another card, which is an idea for a video that I thought might help explain some of these things. So there will be a section in my book where I refer to videos that I've made for you that you can go and actually watch a breakdown and see how things work visually rather than just reading it. So there you have it. That is a set of components of things that can be included in your zero drafting. The last one I want to pull is this one just because it's funny that I did it, but it works. This is a page out of a magazine, and it reminds me what my main female character looked like in my head when I first started writing her. It's literally just a piece of a snippet of a woman's face, but it was enough to remind me what she looks like and kind of what her style is. She's a museum researcher, so she's very conservative, very elegant, but just a little uncomfortable with herself. So those were the visual captures that I wanted to have when I did her card. So there you have it. Those are many of the kinds of things that could go into your zero draft. I've even included maps where I've torn off a piece of a map of a piece of city that I need to remember, stick it on a card, and it becomes part of the draft because it's just a little bit that might inform that writing. So when we get to writing next week, I'm going to take all of this information, this crazy patchwork that is going to become a quilt but is still pieces, and I'm going to show you how those things get pieced together and become the drafting process, the actual work in progress, which is the words written on the page in some kind of a cohesive form that all of this information begins to turn into a story. Okay, so that's where I'm going to leave you. And with that, I am going to throw the ball to Kathleen, and she's going to round out the other side of what this process looks like. So, Kathleen?
Oh, thank you, Victoria. That was a wonderful explanation. And I pick up right where Victoria left off, because Victoria, she's usually the one that is involved with creating structure, isn't she? But she just left you with a chaotic mess. Pieces torn out of a magazine, a piece of a map, folded up cards with holes in them, all kinds of stuff all over the place. How unlike Victoria. Well, now, since she wasn't going to give you structure, I have to. So what I'm going to present, you got all this stuff. Now, where are you going to put it? How are you going to get it organized? How are you going to store it from week to week as more stuff comes in? And that is going to tie us directly into the Zettelkasten itself and to the numbering system. So in part, this is answering a question I promised Bev I would answer, which is how do the numbers on Reawaken the Dream match with Victoria's numbers in Zettelkasten for fiction? How do those two tie in? And I'm going to use the down-facing camera to be very specific about it. But what I want you to think about as you see these numbers, because you're going to see two sets of numbers, I want you to be thinking that not that, oh, do I want that set or do I want that set? Oh my gosh, do I have to choose? No, what I want you to understand is look how similar they are. We both have to store the similar types of information, and notice that as long as you have a set of numbering that makes sense to you, you got it knocked. So this isn't sort of like, oh, there's a conflict. No, it's a field of choices. You can set whatever pattern of numbers works best for you in your Zettelkasten. So without further ado, I'm going to switch over to the down-facing camera so I can get a little bit more specific about, well, where are we going to put specifically those plot points and our story organization between Zettelkasten for fiction and Reawaken the Dream of Writing. So come on over to the down-facing camera with me. Well, my presentation today begins with a card that I wrote up from one of Victoria's videos. And this video was Plotting a Novel Part 2, Setting Up Your System, where Victoria actually goes into where does she put her plot points. And the key thing that we're both involved in, and hopefully you saw from Victoria's presentation, story writers need buckets for everything they're creating. Well, you just saw all the massive stuff that gets created. It's all over the place. Where are those buckets that we can stuff the information? And that's where I'm going to be a little bit more specific today. Victoria and I both use numbers for our Zettelkastens. Victoria chose 7,000 for her novel, and her next novel will be 8,000. My number, if you know from Reawaken the Dream of Writing, 4,400 was the first project and 4,500 the next. So we both have the concept of defining blocks for each project. I have a section called Fabulous Fragments. Victoria has the same material organized differently. You don't need to worry about these numbers. You'll get them in her book. But I will include a photocopy of this card in the notes that you can pick up over in LiLLiPub. So whether I'm dealing with Fabulous Fragments or with an actual project, I divide my story up by characters, locations, history or backstory, the message I'm trying to convey, and the story arc. That gold arrow there is because that's where I'm going to focus in on today. And the story arc pertains whether it's a fabulous fragment or your actual story. Back in the Fabulous Fragments, I picked up from Victoria her idea for snippets of dialogue. Oh, what a great idea. So I simply extended my numbers to pick up snippets of dialogue and experience collection. What a great thing to have a collection of experiences in my fragments. So I made a space for those as well. And obviously Victoria has numbers for those in her system. The only place where we didn't line up was I have in my ideas for history and backstory. She keeps those by character. But we both have all of these same concepts have a place. So let's focus in on the story arc. In her video, Victoria presented Derek Murphy's plot dot system, and she divided it up into 4 acts. He spread it out into 3. So I've copied Victoria here, and you'll notice in her video and also in this chart here that there are 24 plot beats, each of which is separated at every 3 by a major plot point. And so because we both use a Zettelkasten, we both needed to have a place to put this kind of information. So let's take a look at how our 2 systems compare. On this card, I've worked through the first 6 plot beats and the first 2 plot points. Victoria's starts at 7,000 for her novel, and so her first plot beat is 7,001, 2, and 3. And then here's her first plot point is at 7,003A to indicate where it goes in the sequence. Likewise, 3 more plot beats and another plot point. It's now called 6B to indicate where in the sequence it goes. Well, these all fit just beautifully into my system. For me, they're going to be part of that story arc, so they're going to be in 4550. Since I'm already down quite detailed at 4450, I'm not going to be able to run from 1 to 24. In this numbering system, I've only got 1 digit left. So what I have is I go with 4450.01, 0.02, 0.03, and then when I get to my plot point, it's 03A, 0.04, 0.05, 0.06, and then the next plot point, 06B. So what I hope you notice from this is that everything has a place in Victoria's system and in my system. Whatever numbers work best in your Zettelkasten, the way you're putting it together, those are the numbers that you can use. And now you have two examples of how you can structure your information. And when Victoria's book comes out, you'll have a lot more detail as well on some of that additional information where she puts it compared to where I put it. So I hope that this is valuable for you. All of those cards that I showed you, and also Derek Murphy's system, will be available over on LiLLiPub. So if you're not yet a member of LiLLiPub.org, be sure to join us over there so that you can pick up that information and join the conversation. Because even though we're now finished with our Tuesday map, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we talk about these things over in LiLLiPub. And on Saturday, we get together on a Zoom call every Saturday for all the members of LiLLiPub.org who want to join us. So please consider joining us over in LiLLiPub. Victoria, do you want to wrap us up?
Absolutely. That was awesome. I love how each of our systems and each of our approaches are so complementary and give a nice round view of what this process can look like. The most important thing that I just want to stress as a last reminder, especially to our newer writers, is when you're looking at the plot box, which is labeled sequentially from 1 to 24 with the major plot points feathered in between, don't feel like you have to use all 24 of those beats, because you don't. Even though they're divided into chunks of 3, you might use one of them in a section, or you might not use any of them. Out of those 24 plot beats in an entire book or story, you might only use 9 of them. It doesn't matter. So it's really important to remember, this is not a formula that you have to follow sequential linear stepping stones. This is more like a circle where you will go forward, you'll go backward, you'll pick and choose the things that might work here or might work there. The plot box is just set up as a guide, and those beats are reminders of things that you might think to include in your story. Take what works, what speaks to you, and chuck the rest. You only need to use what works. So hopefully, as Kathleen said, this gives you enough of a grounding in a system that's laid out so that you can start thinking about your story, start thinking about the kinds of things that you want to include in it, and then start loosely sequencing those things so that you can start putting your story together. So that is just a tiny preview of what we'll talk about during the writing week, because I'm going to break this down for what we've just gone through and talk about how you actually get it into words on the page, because they won't stay in your head forever. So please do join us over in LiLLiPub. We would love to see you there. And as always, we'll see you next time.
Thank you. See you next time. Bye-bye.